Okay folks, I'm going to be showing you how to use a table saw to make dovetails with as opposed to doing them by hand or using a router or some kind of jig like that. Just use the table saw. One thing we're going to need beforehand though is a marking gauge, and this is a little Paduke, you can see it's reddish wood marking gauge, and I'm going to make one. This is 7 degrees. I'm going to make one for 10 degrees just to show you how that's done. For example, you can put the marking gauge here and mark your tails down the front, and you can mark across the top here. We're also going to use this as we're cutting this to cut the tails on, or cut the pins rather, rubbing a saw up against here, so the pins will go an angle down the tail where the tail slips into the pins, or the pin slips in, it slips into the tail, either way, and then we'll have a saw rub up against the side of this hardwood Paduke, and it'll be one of those flush cut saws, so that it makes a thin curve and it won't disturb the side of this. But it needs to stay right up against the side of it in order for it to be accurate. And I'll be explaining that once we get to that point. But I wanted to show you how to make one of these real quick. The critical thing about this is that this back face right here is, well, actually the bottom part is glued on here, but the back face right here needs to be able to rub up against that fence, and I need to be able to rip this inside face so that it's exactly parallel to this back face, and then we'll use the back face to get the angle of the dovetail against this board, just like this right here. So that's how we're going to do that. And first thing I'm going to do is just cut off a piece of this Paduke. I'm going to make it about the same length as this right here. And so get my ear protection on. Now what we'll do, I'll just use this for more small projects I need in the future. I really only need this one, and so I'm going to cut this in half in order to get 2 pieces to be able to glue together, so that I'll have this piece as well. So I'm just going to kind of hold it right in half like that and cut it one more time. Okay, so this is going to be glued together like this, so you can see what it's going to look like right there. And so this will be, and then once I get that glued on there, this may not be exactly straight because the glue kind of slides and all that kind of stuff. So when I finish this, I'm going to rip this extra off, including this part up here, against this fence like this. And then I've got to turn it around and rip that ripped face. I need to rip a new cut on this inside piece right here, so that it will be exactly parallel to the back side, because that's going to be critical. If it was angled like this and this back side were cut straight, then it would, you can see that it would throw off the angles dramatically. So that's why we've got to cut an inside. Now you'll notice on this one, there's a kerf right there where I cut the inside of this back face, and that's where I had the saw set a little bit higher than I needed to. I'm going to try to avoid that this next time when we do this. But the next step is to glue it up, and I'll see you back when I get ready to do. I'll go ahead and glue it up, and then once it's glued up and dried, I'll do the rest of it on the table saw here, and I'll show you that. I realize my head is cut off in the picture. So once it dries with the glue, this thing. I'll get back to you, and we'll turn the cameras back on, and I'll show you how we cut this up, both getting it parallel with the back and the front edge right there, and then we'll cut the angle on here. So it'll be 10 degrees, and we'll use this really accurate Craig miter gauge to set those 10 degrees on there. This one's 7 degrees, and I did the same process here, and it is extremely accurate. So we'll see you in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to try to make this gauge about the same distance between, I'm going to make it a little bit longer the distance between here and here, so I've got some room to cut it off. So I'm going to push this block on top, so there's a little bit of gap you can see right there. Move this out to the side, and I'm going to make a mark across there. So I've got my pencil line, so this is going to get glued to that pencil line. It'll be sticking out too far back here, but we'll cut that off when we get ready. So first thing, put some glue on that side, and put some glue on this side. So you see a lot of glue squeezed out, so we got plenty of glue here. I'll try to clean that glue up in just a minute. I'm just going to hold it until it tacks up. Rub it back and forth to try to get it ready. So this is going to be my reference face, this front of it right here, and then I'm going to cut the back off to make it parallel with the reference face, and then I'm going to cut this little piece off with a saw depth blade set, so that this is upside down, and it'll cut into this piece parallel to the back side of it, which is parallel to this. So that should work. All right, so it feels like it's tacked up some now. I can probably let go of it. And what I'm going to do is just clamp it up. The plant's moving on me, or moving the wood on me, so I need to find this part where it's not going to move. That's the problem. This glue up part is not very accurate in this process. That's why we've got to correct it at the table saw once we get done. So everything here is wider than it needs to be and longer than it needs to be, and in there like that. So now I'm going to wipe off the excess glue. And I don't know whether I'm going to finish this or not. I mean, put a finish on it or not. But if I do, I want to put some sort of oil on it. Okay, this will be good right here. So it's dripping off onto this piece of wax paper right here. And I'm just clean this off with this paper towel. So you can see me cleaning this off. It's going to go into that end grain a little bit, but that's part what I want to cut off. So, but this part that I'm cleaning off on this face right here is not going to be, and so once I get through getting the excess glue off, I'm going to wet a paper towel and wipe up all the glue before it dries. This remains. All right, so that's that. We've got some to clean up over here. I'll get the rest of that with it. And then this piece right here, I'm going to use this little triangle shape. This little triangle shape, you have to bend it to make it fit both sides at the same time. It doesn't always work exactly right, but there got it pretty good there. All right, so I think I've got most of the excess glue off. Now I can wet this paper towel. Got a spray gun full of water here. And get it nice and wet. And push it down in the corner so that it cleans up. Get it wet and then dry it off. Dry the excess water off. I really don't need that down there because that's going to get cut off, but we'll cut the angles on it. That'll get cut off. I do want to get this cleaned up. So it's ready to sit here and dry for, oh, I mean, you could get by with 15 minutes, but I'm gonna wait 30 minutes, and then we can actually work it on the table saw. So throw the wax paper away, and I'm done with that. All right, so that's a little interlude into the glue up process. Okay, folks, the Paduke marking gauge for dovetails is glued together, but it's still very rough. And just to show you, for example, I'm going to use this dial caliper here. Loosen it up a little bit. So if I measure down one side of it, between this face and the front face, that's going to be the corner that's sitting up against here, it measures exactly 5/16. You can see it right there. So when I look at the other side and look at the measurement, it's about a 32nd less than, I mean, more than 5/16. So that's a problem, but the way we solve that is that, I mean, I knew that was going to happen. We're going to cut this face again using a depth gauge on this saw, but I've got to establish the face first. And so this is going to, let's see, that's a rough cut. I'm going to make this the face that's held up against the fence right here, and then I'm going to cut everything off right here and make it a nice flat face parallel to this face right here against the saw. So we'll move this up close to the blade. We'll raise the blade up so that it cuts through both pieces of wood. I've got my thin kerf blade on here, which I use most of the time when I'm not using a dado or a dovetail blade or something like that. So we'll see how this works. So this is going to give us a flat face that we can then turn around and cut this inside face right here against that flat face. So this flat face will be next to this. It's a little too high. That ought to be pretty good right there. Now I could just hold it like this, but that's way too close. So I'm going to use my push stick. And where is that thing? Oh, here it is. it says think on there before you cut. So this one's been through many cuts before, but I will hold this against the fence for a while as I go through this blade, and then I'll trust that this thing is holding it against the fence from there on out. So turn this on. Okay, so now you can see that nice smooth face. This is a really hard piece of wood right here. It burned a little bit up the top, but that's okay. That sits perfectly flat, and it's perfectly parallel with this. So, next thing I want to do is, all right, what I was saying was this is a perfectly flat face now that I just cut. It's really hard wood, so it's kind of shiny. I don't know whether you can see that in the light, how it glares, but I mean, it is just dense wood. Now I'm going to cut about a saw kerf off of this thing right here. I want to see about how much to cut off by looking at this other gauge, because I like the way this one works. So you can see, it looks like I probably need to cut off maybe not quite a quarter of an inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch, and I'll do that with a blade on there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause the video, and I'm gonna bring my blade height indicator out, and I'm gonna change blades to an 1/8 inch thick blade. That will be, I gotta start talking to the camera. I'm gonna change blades to an 1/8 inch thick blade, and I'll be able to make 2 passes against this, and the top of the blade will be at the bottom of this right here, so it'll just carve off that piece as I go across there. I do want a flat top blade though, so that's what it needs to be, a dado type blade or an 1/8 inch flat top rip blade for that purposes, which is what I'll use. And I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, you see this little device right here. Oh, by the way, I have changed out the blade. I've got the 1/8 inch rip blade. I put the new zero clearance for the 1/8 inch blade in there too. I'm going to lower this down to where it's definitely below the height of this, so I can raise it up to it. All right, so it's below that. Oh, actually, look, I'm just going to go all the way down below the surface, because what I want to do is I want to measure this, because this little insert right here may be a little bit higher than this, maybe a little bit different from this. So I'm going to measure where the wood touches the kerf on here. So what I'm going to do is take this dial caliper, and I'm going to put it on top of the piece of wood. I'm going to lock, actually I'm going to get right here in this top dead center mark of this blade right here, and I'll have a tooth pointing to it, but I'm going to put this right over the top dead center of this. I'll push down on the board just a little bit. It won't change it by much. And I'll zero out the indicator here. So I'll turn this in zero indicator. All right, we'll be right within 1/1000th of an inch right there. So now I just need to raise this blade up until it, I'm gonna make sure that tooth is top dead center here. And it's not all the way up yet. too high. I gotta come back down. So there's my 0 right there on this blade right here. So right now it's just a tad bit below 0, so it's below this blade, but I want it to be exactly the width of this. And so I'm going to raise I'm going to check to make sure my top dead center is correct. It fell off the tooth. Yep, that's a good top dead center, because what I'm doing is I'm watching the dial blade go up and down as I'm moving the tooth along the bottom of this indicator right here. That's a flat bottom indicator, and I'm taking it to its highest point. And so now I know that I'm top dead center and it's at highest point, and I'm going to watch this dial caliper until it goes all the way to my preset 0, which is the same as the height of this right here. So that should be pretty good right there. So I'm going to take this off, move it over here, out of the way, and just to test this assumption right here, I'm going to yeah, it just barely touches that tooth right there. So this will be good. And I guess I'm gonna use this same thing right here, and I'm gonna get it all the way over here where it's inside the where I don't leave any tooth. So I got a little bit of blade still showing, and I'll cut it a couple of times until I get it equal to this distance right here. And this one's actually safe enough to where I could use my fingers to go around here, because these fingers will be above the blade, and if anything, this thing will come up like that, and my hand won't be next to the blade. And notice how I'm keeping this knuckle on the inside of this wall to hold my hand right there, so I'll be able to bring that right across there and feel my way through it. So let's turn this on. So you can see where this blade made a curve in here. I mean, that's just barely scarred that wood, and probably because I was pushing down a little bit. But I'm going to take off another 1/8 of an inch to make it match this. All right, that should match it right there. So lock it down, do another cut. Okay, we can continue using this blade to cut the angles on this thing. Remember, this is going to be a 10-degree dovetail, and so I'm going to use my miter gauge, this precision miter gauge from Craig. I recently bought this for this dovetail project, this TableSaw Dovetail project. Let me hook it up there and pull it back. All right, now we've got this back side parallel to this front side, and we got this front side parallel to the back side. So that's all good. We're now ready to put the back side against here and cut 10 degrees one way and 10 degrees the other way. So you should be able to see on this gauge right here, I'm going to loosen it up, and I'm going to take the little pin out of here, and I'm going to turn it over to, let me drop the blade below the surface. And I'm going to turn this to 10 degrees, and although I do have the vernier calipers or vernier scale on here, I don't need to use it because I've got this pin, which is very accurate, and all I need to do is just go back and forth until it drops down in there, and it's tapered, so I push it all the way down, and then I can tighten it up, and that should give me what I'm looking for on cutting this thing. So this thing will be, I guess I can leave it where it is. This thing will be cutting that off right there. And what I have to do is I have to hold it tight against this piece of wood. Let me raise it up, because it'll be needing to cut all the way through that. All right, so that's above it. I'm going to put a little bit of a kerf in there, just so I can see where it's going to hit. Now I know that since I make it just on top of that kerf, it will cut all the way down. And I could clamp this. I need to hold it very tightly up against this fence. So I'm going to push with the handle of the miter gauge and hold this block up against that fence. And I've got my arm over here hooked around the front of this thing. I think I'm going to be safe with this cut, even though it looks dangerous. So we'll turn the Alright, so that's one side of the 10 degrees, and now we need to flip this thing around and put the 10 degrees to the other side. Because I want that same back face, which is parallel to both of these front faces, right here, on here, and it'll cut. You know what? I think that I need to move this fence over some. Because I need a good part of this fence to hold this piece. And it turns out this thing really doesn't need to be any bigger on the back than what I'm showing right there. So I think that'll be fine, just like that. So I'll tighten it down again. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to hold this time. I think I'll have to use a clamp. So let's find a pretty big clamp. I got a really big one, but it's not. I'm gonna have to use a really big one because it's got to be deep enough to reach the bottom of that thing. So I've only got one of these clamps. This is my giant clamp, Since this fence is so tall, this is a Bessie type clamp. That is going to cut right into that clamp. I wonder if I could do it like this. If I did it like that, I wouldn't need the big clamp. So I am going to do it like that. So away with this monstrosity and grab a much smaller clamp. And we'll pull this back. We'll put this right to the edge because that's where I was wanting it. All right, I think that's going to work. I decided just to let that saw blade come to a stop by itself before I moved it back. So there's our gauge, our marking gauge. So we've got a 7° and now a 10° marking gauge. And you'll notice I put a bevel on the back side of this gauge right here. And this one doesn't have that bevel. So I'm going to do the same thing, is put that bevel on it. Okay, that was a scary cut. But I couldn't think of a safer way to do it without messing things up. So basically what I did was I held one thumb on top of the back side right here,
And notice it's not going to go down because I've got the corner of that pressing into my thumb, and I've got this finger pushing down against here, and then I've got these 3 fingers hanging on to the fence over here, and then I'm going very slowly. I go across that and cut all the way through it. And I held it under control the whole time, so I've got my bevel in there. But what I did do was, before I did this, I changed my blade back to my thin curved blade, which is a combination blade. It's much better at cross-cutting, at doing things like this. The blade I had was what I used to cut this face parallel with this face, and that was a little. That blade is not good for this kind of thing because it's a flat top. It's really rough cut. I mean, not rough, but it's hard to cut the wood because it's just all flat. There's already sharp edges to the blade except the top chisel part. And this has got teeth that are angled up to one side, the other, and a flat top raker. Every other tooth or every third tooth, and that worked really well. So anyway, there's the 10-degree angle marking gauge. We'll be using the 7-degree for the rest of this, and it's just a 3-degree difference. I need to get my magic mark on there, which one's which, because just looking at it, you can't tell it without doing this. If I go here, you can see that they are not parallel with each other as they would normally be doing that. And so I think I'll have to measure and then put my mark on there, and we'll be good to go. Alright folks, that's the marking gauge. You'll see it in the next video being used to cut these TableSaw dovetails beautifully, accurately, using a pull type blade. I'll show it to you real quick. It's the Veritas pull saw that's used for flush cutting. So it's kind of a flexible blade. That's okay. I like the thin curve. It's about a 64th of an inch in width, and I'll be able to use this blade against that edge right there to cut perfectly a line that's in line with the tails. To cut the pins so it's in perfect alignment with the tails, and they will fit together like a glove perfectly. So. Show you all that in the next video. Talk to you later.